So you may be wondering why, Candy? Why did you come out with Sunlights? Well, really, I have to be honest. It wasn't that I set out as an entrepreneur just to be a manufacturer and create a product. I truly did it for my own staff as a balayage artist struggling with the types of lighteners that I was using currently. I have an academy in Atlanta. I've been teaching for over 20 years French cutting and balayage. So it made more sense as an educator to create a product that could support my education. So you might say that I am an education company that has a product versus a manufacturer that got a guest artist to support their education. So today I'm going to teach you a lot about some of the techniques that I do that are a little bit more advanced. Some of them you may have already heard of on my YouTube channel, one of which is Bowlayage. The other is Skimming. I'm going to do a foil conversion. I'm going to teach you a little bit about the money piece. I'm also going to teach you a foil stroke, as well as my famous minking technique. All these techniques you can use on a daily basis to be able to do beautiful, seamless balayage every time. So when I'm in the classroom, one of the things that I always teach is the majority of the beauty industry is 84% women. We don't have more time. As a matter of fact, we have less time. Single moms, women on the go, women in business that are trying to make a living and earn a better life. Balayage will allow you to open and expand your market. It will help you to reinvent yourself behind the chair. It'll give you a new purpose. And by the way, they can't do balayage themselves, so your clients will come more dependent on you and your brush stroke. So let's take this journey together with Sunlights, and let me teach you a few of the Candy Shaw Balay Lama tricks. So for every great balayage comes some great balayage tools, and I'm super proud of the ones that I have. And you know what? It's just simple. To me, in my world, I always live by one motto, and that's KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. You really don't need a lot of things to have the perfect paint. So let me tell you a little bit about mine. The first thing that I'm proud of is I mix in a stainless steel bowl. There's a reason for that. To me, I position balayage in a place that it's a boutique service. So the stainless steel doesn't affect any of your hair color and or your lightener. It's very light, very efficient, and it looks great. In the classroom, I always say, have you ever had a steak on a paper plate? For me, the silver bowl ups the value of balayage, makes it a boutique service, and allows you, the balayage artist, to charge more. Everything that I mix in my bowl, I tend to mix with a whisk. Very simply put, I always mix it with love. And by not mixing with my tint brush or my paint brush, I'm allowing my brushes to stay nicer for longer. You can't do a great balayage without a super strong clip. Now, I often say I'm not in the clip business, but it does make a lot of difference when the clip has a lot of strength to it. Because of bruising and bleeding, if your clip is not strong, when you capture the hair and push the hair away for you to paint, and you actually can't see your parting in which you're getting ready to paint, then you possibly are able to push that brush into the hair that's sort of seeping down. So the clip is essential for you to have the perfect paint. Another thing that I love to talk about is my paintbrush. Ergonomically designed for you to hold like a pencil. What I love about this brush is the bristle is long and firm, allowing me to get a nice soft brush stroke. Now, I know there are some balayage artists out there that like to paint hair like this, and I want to tell you why that's a no-no to the Balay Lama. For me, when I take a brush like this and I have lightener on it, I'm actually kicking the product into the hair and causing dotting and spotting. Have you ever blown dry your balayage later, and when you got it all nice and styled, you saw this hologram of these little dots and spots? A couple of reasons are because of that. One is your brush stroke. In the Balay world, we say there's 3 pillars to a consistent and perfect balayage. One is the consistency of the product and the kaolin and the lightener. 2 is your brush stroke. And 3 is your saturation. So the brush allows you to really paint nice and smooth. So you can often think that everything that I paint is always from side to side like that. Never like this, and certainly never like a foil like that. By taking a brush this way when you're painting in a balayage stroke, you're going to allow the product to be pulled off of the hair, and you're going to create lines along the way. So this also has a tail comb on it for efficiency of you sectioning and being able to get your piece. Also I have, and in the 2.0 Bali box, is the loader brush. Now this is the double wide of the single brush. Why I call it the loader brush is the only brush that actually lives in my bowl. So when I've mixed my lightener, my loader brush lives in the bowl. My loader brush is what loads my paddle, but it's also a wonderful brush that I can use when I need optimal saturation. When I have very long hair and I want to put lots of product on at one time, the loader brush allows me to do so. The paintbrush allows me to refine and do tiny spots of hair and pieces of hair. It also allows me to paint the ridges, and I'll teach you a lot about how I ride the ridge later. Of course, my very, very near and dear paddle, this is the Bali paddle. One of the things that I love about the Bali paddle is it fits nicely into the hand so that you can hold it like this. It is also designed with a texture so that the hair can be pulled through the reservoir of the balayage lightener. I always paint from corner to corner, very important. A lot of students often ask me, Candy, are you going to come out with a longer paddle? And the answer is no, because I don't use this like a foil board. It doesn't go in the hair like so, and the hair doesn't paint on the front part of the paddle. The hair actually only paints from side to side. So my body position is very important when I'm painting and letting the hair fall. The paddle I also call my pressure cooker. It allows me to get a lot of pressure and optimal saturation on the back side of my balayage, making sure that my product adheres. Sunlight's a kaolin lightener, 500 grams in this premium packaging, enabling you to paint up to 30 to 34 highlights per tub. What I love about Sunlights is the fact that it's nice and smooth on the outside of your paint, allowing the inside to lift and stay moist up to 7 levels. Of course, you can use heat, but no forced heat. Sunlights can be mixed with any cream developer that you currently have in your salon. I tend to mix everything with 40 volume cream. If you choose to do 20 or 30, you can, but 40 gives you the maximum lift. I also like to think of Sunlights as an equal opportunity lightener. You can use it with any bond multiplier that you choose or that you currently carry in your salon. Sunlights is a hero product. It's the product in your dispensary just for that balayage paint that you're going to do. Lighteners are created for foiling. Sunlights is not for foiling or on the scalp bleaching. It is simply for open air painting and hand painting. The Bali wrap is the perfect wrap for the balayage artist. It comes in 3 sizes. Short for short hair, giving you about 150 paints per roll. Medium for medium hair, giving you about 100 paints per roll. And long for long hair, giving you about 80 paints per roll. What I love about it is it definitely is a conductor of heat for me. It gives me an ability to encapsulate and keep the lightener nice and moist for optimal lift. It's also perforated for me to actually pinch and pull. What I love about that is when you're trying to paint the hair, obviously I put this over. I can see as a window and look through exactly what I've just painted underneath. It also keeps me nice and clean even if I want to paint low lights on top of as well. One thing I also love about it is it has no gum in it. So if you go like that, the wrap just comes straight out like that. So it's not your average sandwich wrap that you might use from the grocery store. Also, it takes 5 times the amount of fossil fuel to create a foil. So once you pull out the Bali wrap, it is going to be more effective and more greener for the environment, only taking up a very small amount. You also cannot recycle those foils, and this, with the carbon footprint of our environment, is much better. The Balay wrap stand. What I love about this wrap stand is it has a rubber bottom, allowing it not to slide and to actually stick and adhere to your station. It's also super heavy, so that when you're painting hair and you're ready to start pulling your wrap, you're not actually pulling your stand along with you. The nice thing about this stand is it fits all three sizes of the Balay wrap, the short, the medium, and the long. And it will stay nice into its place. It looks great in your salon, and it can help you as a balayage artist. The very first way I ever learned to balayage over 20 years ago was the use of a comb. So today I'm going to teach you a little bit about the comb balay and why this particular technique can be really amazing for you. So I've created a nice white comb. Obviously I like it, it has my name on it, but more importantly what it is it looks different than a cutting comb. One thing that you can't have when you're doing a comb balay is a comb that has a tail on it or a hook. The only way, you have to think about it like knitting, and this is a technique that you're really going to love. It's great for hairlines, part lines, men's hair, and I also love to use the comb balay technique when I'm trying to put pepper back into the salt. So stay tuned and look at how I teach you a little bit about the comb balay. Mixing. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges with anyone with any lightener. So if you think about a foil lightener versus a balay lightener, they are vastly different. Why? Because of the kaolin and clay in a balayage lightener. A foil lightener, typically, you want to mix a little soupy, a little runnier. Why? Because when you put it inside of a foil and it goes under the dryer, it has a tendency to dry out. But in the balay world, we are directly the opposite from that. We don't want things to be soupy or runny or drippy. It's important to be able to allow the clay to do its work. Now, if you think with me, if you're walking down to the lake and you go close to the water, the sun has sort of baked in the outer edge of the mud or the clay. And when you step in it, your outside shell is hard and the inside of the clay is moist and soft. And that's ultimately what we're trying to create when we're mixing sunlights. Now, Sunlights is an equal opportunity lightener. What I mean by that is you can not only mix it with any cream developer that you currently have, 20, 30, or 40 volume. I personally prefer 40. You can also mix it with any bond multiplier that you choose, but you don't need to up the volume of your developer in order to mix it with Sunlights when you are using a bond multiplier. So some simple, fast, steadfast rules here. Of course, my silver bowl, as I said earlier, a stainless steel, I like that because to me, it just ups the value of what balayage is, a boutique service. The Sunlights, of course, 500 grams, you'll get anywhere from 30 to 34 paints out of one tub. I usually take 1 scoop of Sunlights. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. So 1 scoop of Sunlights into my bowl. Then I take a 1-to-1 ratio of 40 volume cream, and you can see that I just put it in the same identical thing to make life easy. I'm going to put the lightener in, and a very important part of mixing. And this is actually something I learned from a French woman back in the day. It's really funny. This kind of comes to my mind, you know, when a teacher teaches you something, you're like, oh my gosh, I remember that I was always taught that every time I mix my balayage, I want to mix with love. So I'm not wanting to actually frappe or mix really hard. What I want to do is mix with love. So to me, I guess that would be in the kitchen, it would be more like folding balayage or folding the lightener. So you can see I'm just folding the lightener together. My motion with my whisk is just more side to side. I want to make sure that my lightener does not look shiny or wet, that it just looks matte. and that the consistency of my lightener is more like that of a sour cream and or a toothpaste consistency. Yes, I want to make sure that it sticks into my whisk, and there are times when you do have to kind of beat it out a little bit in order to get it out of your whisk. But one thing that I do know for sure is that once I have mixed my sunlights, I want to make sure that it's in my bowl just as so, and that when I go to flip it over, nothing happens, that my lightener is nice and firm in my bowl. The other thing that I also want to make sure of is that my loader brush is the only brush that lives in my bowl once I've mixed it. I never put my paintbrush in my bowl and let it live. But my loader brush should be able to stand directly up into my lightener like so. This ensures that my lightener is mixed thick enough in order to get ready for my paint. So when you're walking back from the dispensary and you've mixed up your sunlights with your 40 volume cream developer of choice, make sure you do the little product test. Stand your loader brush up, and then you'll know whether or not it's firm enough. Now you're ready to go paint seamless, beautiful balayage highlights. The question I get all the time is, how do I convert my guest from a foil to a balayage? Well, in the balayage world, we do talk about that balayage is more like lasagna and foiling is more like that of spaghetti. So, of course, one thing I do know is that our guests are not always up to date on what they need to know about seeing a shadow at the root or seeing more dark in the hair. So one rule of thumb that I can use that I think is a very helpful tool is during consultation. A lot of times people will bring in pin boards, maybe their Instagram, or maybe they are not even on social media and they bring in a magazine. And what I tend to do is I take the picture, and I've just cut out a picture just to show you, and I actually turn the picture upside down. And I show them the picture upside down, and I ask this question: where does the color live in this hair? It's up to us as hairstylists to re-educate our guests on understanding that the valleys and the dark are very important. I mean, after all, what makes light look lighter? Dark. So for me, if I turn it upside down, it takes the focus and the focal point off of highlights that come directly from the scalp, which is what we were doing back in the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s. So of course now they're seeing a different type of flavor. So in the classroom, of course, I get the question all the time. Well, my guest really does want to see that streak all the way up to the scalp. They don't want to see just dark at the scalp and light on the ends. Well, now what I'm going to do in a foil conversion is I'm going to kind of teach you how you can begin to ease your way over to the balayage world from the foil world. One thing that we can do, of course, is the very simple technique of just highlights and lowlights. And we all know basically how to do that. So just for those of you who might wonder how I put in highlights and lowlights, I just want to go through one section of that before I actually show you my foil stroke. So here I am just going to take a highlight and paint, of course tapping at the regrowth, rubbing in the middle, adding more. We rub in the middle for friction. Friction adds heat and lift. The middle of the hair is the coldest part of the hair, so it's important that we do that. So now as I take my first highlight, I can make the choice as to whether or not I want to go ahead and lay in another highlight and another highlight, or if I want to pick up my paddle and actually do a low light next. For me, I really feel like sometimes the low lights should live underneath the hair. So let me show you what I mean. Here I am going to go ahead and add another highlight, just as if I was mimicking weaving for a foil. So my weave is what I would call probably a medium weave. My placement of my highlights are about 1/4 of an inch apart. And now I'm going to just add another highlight. So by doing so, I have created, like I said, the look of a foil. Now my guest doesn't feel like she didn't have something close to the scalp, and she can still see the lines in which she's a little bit accustomed to. So now I'm going to show you how I actually add my low light in. I'm just going to come in, same type of procedure, adding in my low light. My low light formula will typically be something that's in the family of close to where the hair is already. I call it my shifting color. And just so you can see me a little bit better, I'm just going to shift her just a little bit so you can see how I take my tail comb and I actually come under the hair like that. And now I add my low light in throughout like that. That gives me the illusion, or the optical illusion, of creating peaks and valleys, or as we say in the Bali world, the breaks of the hair. So of course I could go on and continue with my highlights and continue popping in my lowlights. But if you want, you could still do a highlight, low light, highlight, low light. It's really up to you to customize your balayage. This just gives you options of how you can sometimes keep your guest happy with making sure that you have enough highlights right on the part line. Now I'm going to show you the foil stroke. So I know I showed you a little bit of highlight and low light. So what if you really want to begin to convert your guest from a foil to a balayage? So there's different ways to do it. In a minute I'm going to teach you about color melting. But right now, if she has a part line, and she's that guest that gets the shampoo and she goes back to your shampoo bowl, and she goes from the shampoo bowl into your station and goes like this, and she is looking directly for those highlights, here's a really great way to ease her back from the hash marks to more of a seamless balayage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first start with my highlight pieces. So just as if I was weaving the hair, I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 'So now I have 4 little weaves in the hair. Maybe I have 5. Maybe I even come back here right in the crown of the head and I create 1, 5. Okay, so that could be a touch-up. Very easily, just your normal. She came back in. I'm just touching up that hair from her last highlight, from her previous highlight. Okay, so you can imagine that would be a foil, a foil, a foil, a foil, and a foil, right? So how would I convert that? Because again, that was done in the hair on a more horizontal basis. Okay, so now I'm just going to pick that up all in one, and I'm going to shoestring it. And watch how when I shoestring this hair, it actually just helps to comb that product into the hair and identify any of the places that might be open and need more product. So by doing so, I've shoestringed that. I'm going to take my additional product. I'm going to fill in those little areas that I need to make perfect. And on the outside of the hair, oops, that's a Wookiee. I call those Wookiees. On the outside of the hair, I'm going to begin to come on down with my lasagna and my bigger brush stroke. So now I'm going to start to make this hair appear more balayaged than foiled. Adding more product to the paddle, coming back in. Nice flat long brush strokes. Nice long brush strokes. And you can see how what I'm doing now is I'm actually widthening the size of the streak. So making that a little wider. So 1 and 5 have become a little bit wider, mimicking balayage. Now 2, 3, and 4, I'm just going to lightly bring down and create a seamlessness by dry brushing into that hair. And now, by doing so, I am creating the look of balayage. Just skimming in the middle for seamlessness. So that little bit of skim, that little bit of dry brush there is now going to make sure that my section is all nice and perfect. Now, based on my level of taste and based on the picture in which they brought me in consultation, I can determine as to where I want to begin to cross over the line of the 5 streaks. So here's where I'm crossing over. I push it onto my paddle and begin to saturate. So that saturation is now allowing me to create the lasagna and get rid of the spaghetti. So you can see how that causes you to get a lot of a different look about what it is that you're doing. You've got the foil look at the top and more of the balayage type of feel at the bottom. And this is a great way for you to begin the process of converting your guests from a foil to a balayage. Now you might be asking yourself, well, what are you going to do about the bang? I get questions on how do I dress the bang of the hair. Quite frankly, what I tend to do is I disconnect it as if it were another part of the head. So here I'm going to paint the normal one-length haircut, and here I would actually paint the bang. And when I came to address the bang, my partings may be at an angle, they may be straight, they may be crescent. It would all depend on where I wanted the look of the bang to be highlighted. But one trick that I always use in the balayage world is a process called the zipper. So as I am putting on my bali wrap, I tend to fold just a little bit of the top down like so. So just by folding that little lip down, it allows me a nice clean line. When I'm underneath the hair, that fold in the bali wrap lifts the hair in the section from underneath from weighing down too much onto my section. So by having that little fold, I'm actually adding a little air to the hair. And by adding air to the hair, then I know that pressure is not going to cause bruising or bleeding. But the zipper is something, now granted this side would need to be painted as well, but the zipper is something to where I actually take my wrap and I'm going to place it on both sides of my part like this. Obviously I have no lightener on the other side. But the purpose of that is when you do have to add a little bit of heat, of course not a forced heat, a heat like a climazon or roller ball, infrared lights, or potentially a hooded dryer that's been turned on and then turned off and just heated up. I'm able to actually open my zipper like so and add that little extra bit of concentrated heat onto my balayage for the maximum amount of lift for the last place that I actually painted. So the zipper, if I were to take my bali wrap and I would just be careless and finish and be excited about my finished art piece and just kind of go like that, then once the heat hits the bali wrap, it's all going to begin to mesh together. And if I were to check or need to check my streaks, it would be impossible for me to lift that off. So the zipper gives you freedom to open up your part and to be able to add additional heat. So now I want to teach you a little bit about a technique that I use called skimming. This has been a game changer for me for many, many reasons. Number one, it's great for color balancing, correcting color. It's great when you want to paint baby lights and just little tiny highlights along the way. The motion of skimming is a little different too, and I'm going to show that to you on my mannequin head in just a moment. But I first want to talk to you about how to address the side of hair. I always get that question. How do I part off the side? Obviously, when we're doing foiling, we're very used to being vertical or horizontal, creating straight lines or hard lines in the hair. So I'm going to show you a couple of quick things of how I sort of teach this in the classroom. So if this is your head shape, there's three different ways that I tend to use when I'm balayaging and skimming, okay? So the first way would be a part that actually, let me just use another color so you can see the difference. The part would be more like this, following that of more like a bob or the haircut. A lot of times people will ask me, well, if I go this way, do I do that in long hair or do I do that in short hair? I want you to know that you can do it in any hair, but just be mindful of the placement of the highlights and where the breaks are that you're going to paint. So with a bob being this way, it's really easy for me to put the emphasis of my highlights in the high peaks and the low peaks, creating lines and troughs, sort of like that are in my hair and how my hair is actually painted. Imagine that guest that comes in the salon that you actually cut the back a little bit shorter trying to create a bob in her hair. I can actually make her hair look longer with a paintbrush based on how I do the placement of my balayage. So this is one way that I might do it. Obviously painting breaks, crochets, brochets, or those types of different ways. Another way that I might actually do my sectioning would be a section straight across. Now a straight across section, of course, we say that when we're trying to convert a foil, then it is best to always paint on the bias. So if her hair was previously highlighted with a line, I often say if you take a line and you paint a line, you're going to get a line. However, there are situations where I want to create troughs in the hair or really strong pieces. In balayage, we say that foiling is like spaghetti and balayage is like lasagna. Therefore, the color circumference of the streak is a lot larger. Now, this can be used for high, low, and it also could be used for a foil conversion. These are all different ways that we can do it. Now, granted, I could still paint this with nice little streaks and or skimming or any of the techniques that I use, but just be mindful that based on how you take your line and your sectioning is based on how you're going to get your results. Now, the final way that I like to teach, and this is probably the most popular. So when you think about balayage in general, you think about things that come away from the face. So with that being said, this particular line is going to go more like that. So that I'm actually painting on the underside of the hair, so as I flip the hair up and over, I'm getting the lightness around. Now you'll also know that when I paint like this on mostly long hair or around the face, I'm creating that ribboning effect and I'm riding the ridge of the hair. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the ridge and how I do that. Now again, short foils, obviously long and bobs. There are many different ways that I can part the hair off, and keeping in mind that I can use all three. So I could start with a parting like that just to grab my hairline. Then I could turn back and do a straight line after that. I could even do a crescent shape if I felt necessary, and then I could finish it off very easily with a V if I felt like I wanted to. So all of these are okay to use, but each of them are going to give you a different result. So making sure that you follow a good rule of thumb, and also know that whatever you do on one side does not necessarily mean that's the same thing you do on the other. To me, hair color should always have asymmetry and it should always look unique. And what makes your brush stroke and your paint stroke better is when you change it up and you actually paint the ridges and the layers of the hair. So in balayage, we often say we paint energy to haircuts, and your sections will help you find the energy, find the breaks, find the peaks, find the valleys, and paint the most beautiful of results. Skimming. Couple different ways that I love to use it. You know when you have that guest that comes in, and I actually kind of laugh when I say it because I probably created this technique really out of necessity, simply because I too am a hair colorist. I too have the same struggles as you do behind the chair. And basically when they come in, you can literally see their vacation schedule based on their regrowth line. Like, oh, that's when she touched it up. And that's when my assistant maybe didn't mix it perfectly, and that's when we touched it up Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock, and maybe we were in a hurry. And then there's that, oops, it got left on too long, and so on and so on, or she did it at home. And so sometimes when people have unpigmented hair and their touch-ups tend to have lines, and as much as you think and you try and you measure and you do get them. And the environment causes that as well. The water causes that as well. The fact that they vacation and they're in minerals or in the salt ocean or things like that make hair colors oxidize. So how can we get the perfect color? And how can we correct that without having to truly go through and start over? So I created this technique called skimming, and basically what it is I skim on the top surface of the hair very lightly. Different than the normal brush stroke of balayage, my hand is in a circular motion, and my hand sort of bounces off the hair like a trampoline. And by doing that, I'm just barely touching and bruising into that hair, causing the lightener to just peel back those unwanted tones and get rid of the lines in which have been created. By doing that also, it allows me to optimize my pressure wherever I want to lift more. So think with me for a minute. If this is lighter and the color is lighter, say it's a level 6, level 7, and it's a little bit lighter, my touch is going to be a very soft circle. As I move down the shaft based on the lines and based on the demarcation, my pressure can get harder. So as I'm moving through the hair, my pressure can go in and out. Now, on a mannequin head, it's a little difficult to actually show or mimic the corrective color. But this will give you opportunity to just sort of see how you can give your hair a facial, or really sort of a chemical peel, if you will. By doing that, I'm stripping all of that unwanted color off the hair prior to putting my base color on after. So I'll skim the whole head, takes me 7 to 10 minutes, very fast. I'll leave the regrowth and the unpigmented hair exposed. Then I'll take my guest back, shampoo the hair, dry it really fast, and apply my new base color on the unpigmented hair, and now mix a separate formulation either for the mids and the ends. Now what I'm doing is I'm really color balancing. So let's get started. So I'm going to take my loader brush, and I tend to like to skim in larger areas with my loader brush and in smaller areas or more defined areas with my paintbrush. So I'm going to take my loader brush, I'm going to smooth out my lightener onto my paddle, and I'm going to take the section that I want to skim. Now the section that I'm going to take is just simply going to be straight and flat. I'm not needing to do a V, I'm not thinking about crochets, I'm not thinking about brochets. I'm simply just thinking about the technique. So if you can see overhead, imagine if this was her regrowth. This was the old color lines that went through the hair. So now I'm going to take a circular motion and my brush, and I'm just going to lightly skim onto the hair. So the harder I press, the more lightener I'm going to put on. And the softer I press, the less lightener I'm going to put on. So you can see that my motion is just very soft. And say, for instance, this was a really bad line, so I could take my lightener and just really push right here. Maybe that was an area that the hair had grabbed. And then as I move towards the front or the top, I'm just lightly pushing the lightener in. And really all I am is on the surface of the hair. And normally in the salon I wouldn't necessarily do this, but just for my viewing, I want to show you, see as I begin to open that hair up, you can see where I added pressure in my skim, and you can see where I actually did not. So based on this, I have my regrowth here. I have not as much. I have a little bit more pressure and a little bit more saturation. And even down here might have been an area that she had a really dark piece. So by skimming throughout the hair, this gives me the ability to begin the process of giving a sort of, like I said, a facial to the hair. So again, maybe it's just in the middle. Maybe I just skim in the middle and I create the lightener there. And then I just sort of dry brush as I come up. And again, keeping that arm in more of a circular motion as I'm putting the lightener on. So based on where it is I want to put it, I can. There's no right or wrong. It's simply your decision being made over the fact that what it is that you're trying to skim. So again, taking that section of hair, making sure it's nice and combed out, get your body positioned together, and then a nice circular motion. And that circular motion is going to also create baby lights. So say for instance this wasn't a corrective color, you could very easily just do this whole technique throughout a level 7, 8, 9, or 10 and create a beautiful baby light look. So say your guest comes in and she doesn't want heavier highlights. So by doing a skimming technique, rounded, rounded, circles, circles, by doing a skimming technique you can still create the essence of baby lights and then put more pressure and more lift to the ends of the hair. So this gives you that effect with just those ridges that are getting painted. So now let me show you exactly how to do a little bit of skimming on the side. So as I am teaching balayage, I'm always talking about the ridges of the hair. I'm also always talking about that if it's not white, it's not light. So wherever I'm putting that pressure is where I'm getting the maximum amount of lift. Just like I showed you in the back. Obviously the circles, wherever the pressure goes is where I'm peeling the color back more. Wherever I'm lighter with my touch is where I'm just basically breaking the base. You all know how to do that, right? So in this case, I want to talk to you and to all the balayagers out there about the thing called the curling iron. The curling iron is the one thing that we use the most to do what? Hide sometimes, maybe not the perfect, most seamless balayage, but really one of the things that we use the curling iron for is to push light forward and sit dark back. So when you actually make a curl in hair, you're actually making the ribbon of the color appear on the higher part of the hair and the depth of the color go into the lower part of the hair. So how do you paint a seamless balayage on straight hair that you don't have to curl and yet mimic what curling hair does? So I know that every morning when I wake up and look at social media and I see the back of everybody's head, it's always curled. So let the Balay Lama take a moment to teach you how to actually paint hair straight and be able to love your highlights both straight and curly so that the ridges appear high and the depth and contrast is low. So as I said in my drawing earlier about the various partings that I take, you can see here that I've taken a parting from the 3/4 of the eyebrow to the ridge of the back of the ear. And this right here is going to be my whole section for the side. Now before you write me on Facebook and ask me, do I ever paint behind here? The answer is of course yes. This is just a technique to show you. So wherever I leave my triangle, because this is just a triangle that I've created, I know that I am anchoring a lot of depth and dark underneath. So for that, I know that. However, if this was a really super blonde head of hair, potentially I would paint in the back, go ahead and identify that piece there, and then fold my skim back over it and paint the front. All right, so now just to teach you about how to paint a hairline with the skim technique. I'm going to take my lightener, just as I've done before, loading it onto my paddle. Now this time, instead of using my loader brush, I'm actually going to use my paintbrush. My paintbrush is going to allow me to have more detailing. So again, shoestringing, pulling that piece back. I'm going to hold the hair at the throat very tight. I'm going to take my brush, make a nice J into the lightener. Okay, so first ridge that I'm going to paint on the hairline is going to be the first piece here. Again, the whiter the lightener is on the hair, the more the streak that I am making. Then after I do that, I'm going to go no further, and I'm actually just going to paint this piece. And the reason I always want to paint the up and the down first is to give my hands the potential to hold it at the throat tighter. Okay, so here now I'm going to add my streak. So that's one streak, two streak. Now to do the triple, I'm going to come right into the middle and I'm going to add my third streak. Bending my knees, making sure my brush is flat, I'm going to give a solid piece there. So now you can see my 1, 2, 3 highlight, and you can begin to see the ribboning effect that is occurring. Now by pulling that back, I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to just lightly skim in the middle. So skimming in the middle is going to break that base and lighten those few little baby hairs around the face. Many women use lotions and various retin-A's and things like that cause colors sometimes to get dark around the face. And this just helps me get all those little hairs and break that base. So you can see how I'm just lightly making this lighter, this lighter, this lighter, and yet in the middle I'm just doing soft. So that skim together is bringing that whole section nice and together. Okay, so by shoestringing, I know where my ridge lives. The ridge lives on the outside here. And so to not waste time, I'm going to take my loader brush and begin to ride the ridge. So now my brush stroke changes into a nice flat brush stroke. And I'm skimming. You can just see that whenever I bend my knees, I am lightly releasing the pressure in which I'm painting. And I'm going to add a little bit more lightener. And I don't want to go to the ends until I'm absolutely 100% positive that I love everything else about my paint. So now bringing that all together, I'm going to add the last little bit of sunlights onto my paddle, onto my loader brush, and onto the reservoir, onto the paddle. And I'm going to make sure that I add a lot of pressure here. Lots and lots and lots of pressure. Reload. Remembering that the only two things that touch the hair is the paddle and the bristle of the brush. So I'm going to really make sure that I add that because this is at a bias. I know what's going to happen. I can see my basic outline coming together. This is traveling. My streak is traveling all the way down. And now I have the proper amount of lightener. Now, keep in mind that we're not ever going to do this because when we do, that's what we get. We get lines and we actually remove product from the hair. So if your brush is straight and like that, you're going to end up removing the product. Watch what happens when I just turn my paddle over and I flatten my brush out. Now you can see the product being re-added to the hair. Nice, smooth, long brush strokes. So by doing that, I am making sure that I have optimal saturation onto the ends. The clay is going to dry out on the outside and leaving the inside moist for lifting on the inside. Okay, so now I don't typically do this in the salon, but I do want to teach you about what the curl looks like. So by painting hair just like that, and of course I'm going to reach in with my hand, and if you want to put a glove on, you can. You don't necessarily do it, but I just want to prove a point. I'm actually going to drop this, place my paddle down, and show you what a curl would appear and look like. So now you see how that hair breaks open. It gives you the lighter pieces become the heavier streak. The tinier pieces become the baby lights. And now we end up having the depth behind the curl, the light on the ridge of the curl. Now imagine if this was dried straight. Obviously, again, I wouldn't do this in the salon, but just to show you that when you break that hair open, it's just a nice, soft highlight around the face. And that skimming technique can be done all over the hairline, all over the part lines, and even all over the head. So that can give you a better understanding about breaking bases and adding the multitude of a baby light with a highlight at the same time. The comb balay. Now this is a technique that I learned probably the very first time I ever saw a balayage was done with a comb technique. And now we've of course gravitated towards a painting hair and making things wider and less. But I still really love this technique, and I find that there's a great purpose for it in the salon as it relates to making money. One thing is, for me, the comb balay is great for those of you who are starting out, those of you who are a little bit nervous, can't get your brush stroke right. This is also great for hairlines, great for part lines, great for men's hair. Also great when you want to put the pepper back into the salt. Nothing in my book is uglier than trying to foil dark into gray hair. When you do that, they end up looking like they have a hair transplant, where the hair doesn't naturally move from the scalp like it would with gravity. So the comb balay is the answer to your prayers. It's also a technique that creates baby lights. Maybe you just want to take something and simply give it just a little bit of a splash of highlight. This is a really great technique. It's also good even if you've painted hair and you want to add some low lights in between your painted highlights. The comb balay is your answer. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind is the comb has to look a lot like this, preferably mine, but if not, the comb has to have a small end and a tall end. You always want to use the big part of your comb. You can't have a comb that has a hook. The hook will cause you to not put the product placement in. And you can't have a tail comb. A tail comb won't work because you're actually going to be knitting into the hair. This part of the comb actually combs the hair out in the process of laying in the lightener. So you're going to take your comb like so. You're going to get your loader brush. And with your loader brush, you're going to add your lightener. So your lightener is going to go up and down like this, side to side like that. So making sure that all the teeth are filled with your lightener, nice and smooth. So the lightener in Sunlights works really great with this because it's creamy and it allows you to comb the highlight in. Okay, so as I get that all nice, and usually the first time you have to really work on loading it, I'm going to take my comb and I'm going to hold it like that. And I'm going to remember that I'm going to actually clap. So I can't take my hand this way and go this way, because if I do, it's impossible for me to comb into the hair. So I'm always going to think of my hands open and ready to clap. So I'm going to take the end. The end is going to hook the piece of hair like so. So I'm going to hook into it. That hook is now going to comb that hair out. I'm going to come down with my hands and I'm going to pinch at the throat, just as if I was going to paint the hair. Now I'm going to take my loaded comb and right in the center of what I just did, I'm going to place a piece and a streak. And so that allows me to have a nice comb piece in the hair. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to reload it. Now granted, this is a process that you're not going to use on super, super long hair. Why? Because you'll run out of product. But I'm going to take it and now I'm going to hook it, comb it, hold it, get ready with my comb, and right in the center of that, I'm going to paint it. And my wrist is going to stay straight down with that the whole time. And now I've created a couple little highlights into the hair. Now you can imagine that if I was trying to do this with a permanent hair color or a demi-permanent, semi-permanent hair color, what I could do is very easily go ahead and paint my regular streaks and then come in and add lowlights in as well. So there's many uses for the comb Balay. Get out, try it. It'll wow your guests, no doubt. The money piece. So the Balay Lama will tell you that if you don't paint the money, you don't make the money. So very important to think about. One thing about money and money pieces are typically in a lot of cases you'll see me pancake them, and I'll teach you that when I come to the front. But it is that part that when you know you've hit it on your haircut, that's when your guest comes back from being shampooed and you're blowing her dry and she looks in the mirror and she says, and she kind of gives you the little duck lip. Then you know you've hit the money piece. And that is really important to the haircut, where the fall line is and where that actually falls on the haircut. So for me, there's really two places that the money piece lives. One is in the crown of the hair. Right? That's the part that, you know, when she pushes that up, when she has an updo, when she has a ponytail, whatever it is, that she has that place that lives in the back side of her part that can really identify her crown. Now, if she's thinning, that's also a wonderful place to put lowlights right under the highlight on top. So say, for instance, you have a guest who has a thinning crown. It's great to shadow under and then paint the money piece on top. Because what, of course, makes light look lighter is dark. And then when the hair spreads open, it doesn't look nearly as thin. So the money piece here, I'm just going to take, I've already painted a few pieces here. I'm identifying where that money piece lives. And I'm just going to come in. I'm going to hold it up. Now, very important, when you're painting on top of the head, you don't want to paint down. Because if you're painting down, you have more margin for error. You have potentially a possibility of bruising underneath by dragging that hair back and around. So you want to make sure that you lift your money piece up in the crown high and you paint towards your body. So by painting towards my body, I'm getting a much cleaner brush stroke. I'm also, when I'm pinching that hair, I'm actually opening the hair up a little bit more, and I'm able to put a little product inside of the hair. Now I'm going to just take my loader brush. Why? Because I can. It's quicker. It's faster. My loader brush is just going to load the lightener on. And again, nothing touches the hair but the paddle and the bristle. And the paddle and the bristle come together, and I'm painting that money piece right in the crown. And with a bob, I know for sure that that money piece is going to live right nice in the back of that haircut. And by doing that, I know where I want to also put my valleys if indeed I was low lighting, or even using her own natural hair as my breaks. So the money piece is in the crown here, and now I'll show you how to paint the front. So we started, of course, in the crown, and just for purposes of helping you not to paint the whole head of hair, I just want to identify truly what I mean by riding the ridge, by the fall line, and by pancaking. Okay, so I know I have a lot of little sayings and people are like, whoa, what does that mean? Wait. So I'm hoping I'm going to identify it now here for you today. So if you look at this hair, and you see where the outside of this hair lives, that to me is what I call a ridge. So if I'm in the back and I pull hair up, I'm painting on the outside surface of the hair, not the top surface of the hair. That allows me to create seamless balayage every time. That's number one. Number two, a fall line is really what gravitates off the highest point of the head and is the falling of your haircut. You're going to see that really well in my minking technique next. But at the end of the day, what I'm trying to get across to you is there's only two places in the head that you would ever pancake. And what I mean by pancaking is that's when you paint on the front side and the back side of the hair, all the way up to the top. Now, when we're down here in crochet or brochet, yes, of course we're going to paint on the front and the back. But the only place that we ever pancake all over, all the way to the scalp, is on the fall line, the money piece, the crown. Okay, so here we go. Add your product, of course, to your brush, taking your ridge here. Now, knowing what I know, I have to first get my body position right, get my hand position right, and I first want to paint on the top side of my pancake. Okay, so now knowing that that piece of hair there is the piece of hair that's going to fall this way. Now I'm going to elevate that hair and I'm going to paint on the back side of it too, on the hairline. So by painting it on the hairline, I've essentially painted on the down and the up, okay? Essentially like flipping of a pancake. Now I'm going to give a nice long brush stroke. I'm going to get my trusty loader brush, and just in the interest of time, now I'm going to come back and add more lightener. Obviously, if it's not white, it's not light. So I'm going to make sure I don't go any further. This is probably the single biggest challenge in balayage. Everybody wants to go to the ends first. And my advice to you is you get what you like at the scalp and in the midshaft perfect before you move any further to the ends. The ends are just the cherry on top. They're just the gravy. So at that point, once I get that right, I'm going to lay that onto my paddle. Now, before I was painting sort of back and away from the hair. Now I'm going to actually rotate my body and rotate this piece and walk this piece around as I'm beginning to get ready to let it fall. One of the things I love about my brush is I can actually separate hair underneath if I want to drop a piece in between. So keeping in mind that if there was highlights underneath or low lighting underneath, I would be able to separate that hair open and then drop my piece. So now you can see the highlight comes from the top and from the underneath, just like a pancake that you would flip. That is the fall line. Now let's paint the other side. Of course, we identified on this side. Now you can sort of see the ridge on the bob of this hair. Now imagine if this was a long layer, this hair was coming back. That's the piece de resistance. That's the part of the hair that they love to see the brightness at. And even if you're doing a color melt, or you're doing a shadow at the root, or you're doing something where you apply a base color, a lot of times you'll see me apply my base color every single place except the money piece in the front. That way I can paint all the way down to the scalp and make sure that I give a bright pop there. So now, just exactly like I did before. Now, granted, if I wanted to, I would already have gone ahead and painted the hairline here. This would be the last piece of hair that I would be painting. But again, for purposes of video, I just wanted to keep it nice and clean so you could see everything without a bunch of lightener all over the hair. Okay, so the size of my piece is going to be determined by the pitch of that ridge. So however that ridge is pitched is how my finger and my section is going to be taken. So don't be afraid to take a lot. Now you're going to see me just come in with my loader brush, and I'm going to paint from the top first. Okay, so now I know that I have that. I'm going to actually pull it back a little bit. I'm going to change my body position, and I'm actually going to come down even lower on that hair. This is scary to most people because when you see something really wide right there, you think of the days of the 90s when we had spunk chunks and chunky monkeys or whatever they used to call them. But realize that when this hair dries, it's going to open and dissipate. And the dissipation and distribution of the hair is not going to be as strong as you think, because the gravity on the fall line is going to fall over that. So by falling over, now your ridge is not nearly as thick. Okay, so I'm going to be back, straight up, straight down. And the reason I use my loader brush here is just because it's quicker and it's giving me more coverage. And as I said on the other side, make sure that your scalp and your mid shaft is all nice and smooth before you go any further. Obviously, I don't want to already be down here and have to walk myself back up the piece to try to get it tight. Okay, now watch my hand here. So anytime I have some product that comes off like that, all I have to do is roll my hand and I'm still on the ridge. So that just smooths that product out there by rolling, just rolling my paddle and my brush back. And now I've rolled back, so essentially pancaking. Okay, so now I am rolling in, rolling out, rolling in, rolling out. Bringing my piece all the way down, adding it onto my paddle. I always work from the corner of my paddle. Why? Because there is a V in the corner of my paddle. By having a V there, it doesn't create a strong line on the back. So imagine if I took my paddle and I turned it this way. Then if I do that, what am I going to do? I'm going to create a big line on the most important money piece of my whole balayage. So being from the corner like this ensures that I'll always be soft and seamless. Ready to drop that piece down, making sure it's nice, white, and light. I bring that down, all the way down to the end. Now, if this was layered hair, I might have to travel with that piece and making sure that I had a traveler that completed my highlight from the top to the bottom. And that, my friends, is why I trademarked the money piece, because the money piece is indeed the most important piece of hair that you paint in your balayages. I am so excited to show you the technique of Bowlayage, something I trademarked because it truly changes the way that you see hair. You know, you have that guest, she comes in, she gets her base color. Maybe she doesn't have enough time for highlights, but you don't know if it's always because she doesn't have enough time or maybe she doesn't have enough money. So I created this technique that I think is really amazing. Now in the Bali world, we do not use the word partial. Partial to me means half price. It means half of a really good thing. So for me, a way to sell it or to present it is as an upgrade service for you to use with your guests in the salon, just to add some sizzle, just add a little sparkle. You've done your base color. You know you have your highlights on the ends. And of course, now she has what I call ring around the rosy. You know, she has the dark all around her hairline where you just covered her gray. Now she has her fresh new regrowth line. So how are we going to get that out, and how are we going to do that in a limited amount of time, very quickly, very efficiently? She can't say no to this. Why? Because she doesn't have to be washed, dried, folded, started over. You just basically shampoo your guest at the bowl. Come back, either towel dry really well or even take a small blow dryer, plug it in very quickly at the bowl. Then you're going to paint the T-zone of the hair, which is just simply the area she sees, the part line. Now, of course, if she has a double part, you'll have to, of course, paint the double part. But for me, how I approach it is I sit the guest up and I'm ready to approach that line there. Now, of course, I often say in the Bali world that sides should be sisters, not twins. So if you want, you can match up your highlights, or you can just bricklay your highlights on the top. Then you can lay your guest back and actually paint her hairline. By laying her back, that's really an amazing way to get the hair out of your way and allow you to get seamless highlights close to the scalp every time. So I'm going to add my lightener to the loader brush, with the loader brush, and I'm going to add it onto my paddle. I often add everything in the left-hand side if I'm right-handed, the right-hand side if I'm left-handed. I'm going to take my paintbrush, and just like I always do, I'm going to take what I call the little J. The J just gets just enough product onto my brush, leaving a nice little dome at the top of the brush, keeping everything nice and flat and clean on the other side. So as my client is sitting up, I'm going to just take my little V right on that part line and begin the process of tap, rub, and push. So I'm adding those highlights right there. Obviously, the pressure of my brush is going to maximize the saturation and also maximize the amount of lightener that I put on the hair. Now, you may choose to just do the balayage on the regrowth. So it is not wrong if you just actually touch up and don't pull through. So let me show you a streak like that. So maybe I would just take a streak like so, and I would actually just paint the regrowth of the hair. Let's do another. Can come in here, paint the regrowth of the hair. Do another. Come in here, paint the regrowth of the hair. And you can see by lifting this hair up and elevating this, I am able to get as close to a lot closer to the scalp. So I'm going to come in here right on the fall line. I'm going to add my last little piece here, and I'm going to show you a little trick that I use. Now again, granted, if I was just touching up the regrowth, that would be the regrowth. But a really quick way for me to do this now is I've actually just painted 4 streaks there, and I can come in and just fan the highlights that I just painted there and pull out my balayage. Now, do I need to go all the way to the ends? Well, it just really all depends on the hair and how compromised or dehydrated the ends are. Also, the biggest thing is for me to know how much highlighting I want on the ends. So on this side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull it through the ends to show you what that looks like. And on the other side, I'm actually going to just do the retouch. So now I'm adding a little bit more energy. Now think about this. This is all the hair that lives on the outside of your haircut. So obviously, I always pre-cut hair prior to painting. So if I had already pre-cut this hair, I'm going to add a little bit more lightener. Of course, in the Bali world, you'll often hear me state that if it's not white, it's not light. Super important to have my brush from side to side as I'm painting that hair. So now you can see I've laid in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This could be a little bit like a foil stroke that you would do in the salon. So now I'm going to step over to the other side, adding a little bit more lightener onto my paddle. And again, this is all done at the shampoo bowl. So now I can address the money piece here. I can come right into the crown, knowing that if I lift that hair up lightly, that I'm going to get a much better brush stroke. So this just gives me nice, smooth, seamless brush stroke by lifting that hair up all the way through to the end, dropping it onto my paddle side to side, adding a little bit more product as I go, just to make sure that I have optimal saturation. The kaolin clay in the lightener allows me to have nice, smooth saturation. Okay, so adding a little bit more product. Let's go to the other side and let's do the same thing. However, this time what we're going to do is we're just going to touch up the regrowth. Again, if this was just a guest in the salon who had just had her base color done. Adding the product just like before, and just at the regrowth, I'm going to touch up 1. And you'll see that I'm just bricklaying through and not matching my highlights up. Nice little V here. Lifting that hair up. And the amount of pressure that I put on that hair is going to be how light it gets. So remember, if I'm just lightly skimming, I'm just going to get a small amount of lift. The heavier, the stronger my pressure, the more lift I'm going to achieve. Now I'm going to come in right in here, and I'm going to add a little bit there. Okay, so now I've painted the money piece on this side, the money piece in the crown, and I'm almost ready to layer back. So I'm going to take my brush, making sure that my saturation is nice and clean and that I have I'm close enough to the scalp. Okay, so my saturation is ready to go. Again, on this side I pulled through and on this side I didn't, just to show you that you can do either. So now I'm going to actually lay her back in the bowl and do the balayage. Definitely this technique works best with a back shampoo bowl. But if you don't have that, don't fret. This is just a wash and go that I actually use on the road. It's just a portable shampoo sink with a chair and a 5-gallon bag of water when I get to hotel rooms and I don't have a shampoo area. But it also can be used just as a means of laying your guests back into. So it's a really great thing for you to have. It's a nice tool. Even in your salon, if you don't have the space, you can use a wash and go to do a balayage. So I'm going to lay the guest back, obviously. Now on this side, what we did is we went all the way through to the end. So I'm going to kind of repeat that process, and I'm going to paint the hair all the way through to the ends on this side. Then when I step over here, I'm going to just do the regrowth, just to show you how you can just add that little sparkle to the hairline. Again, not saying partial to your guest, but just hitting what I call the key spots that make her happy when she leaves. When she wears her glasses on top of her head, or she pulls her hair up in a ponytail when she's on vacation, the balayage is meant for that. Okay, so again, coming back in, same concept, adding my product. Now with the hair being able to come back, I can actually get right on that hairline. And again, remember, we're going to go all the way through here like we did on the first side. And you can see my paddle is from side to side. And the texture on the paddle allows me to pull. So that pulling motion allows that product to get nice and saturated. So I can lay that back. Next piece, I'm going to come in. Now, where I determined to paint on this hairline is completely up to me, and it's also up to what I feel like in her haircut looks the best. So now I'm going to come in, get real close to that hairline there. And if I bruise or bump into the hairline, that's no worry, no need to fret. Again, the brush is on the side to side. I'm going to take my loader brush, adding a little bit more product as I go. There's only 2 things that ever touch the hair, and that is the paddle and the bristle of the brush. You never want to take your brush underneath like this and try to use the tail comb. So now you can see I have the loader brush and the paintbrush in my hand. And I'm going to pull that back and lay it right onto the bowl. Next, I'm going to again reload my paddle, come in, make my J, and continue on down the hairline. Now the tightness of this, obviously this is dark hair on this mannequin head, but if this was a blonde, she would be very happy, because basically what I would be doing is I'd be eliminating any ring around the rosy, as I call it, from a brand new base retouch. Women use face creams, Retin-A, things like that, that cause sometimes for their hair colors to get really, really, really dark around their hairline. And even if you take in your formula and you're adding golds or reds or things like that to contradict that, sometimes it still will grab. So balayage is a really quick, easy way for you to come in and lighten that hairline up. So again, just coming straight in, and nice long brush strokes. Very important, you've got to think about lightener as if it's lotion. If you were applying lotion onto the skin, you would be doing nice long strokes. You wouldn't be tapping lotion on. So it's super important that you think about rubbing the clay in and making the product super smooth, like so. Okay, so now you can see how the bowl has become an efficient tool for me to be able to paint. So now I'm just continuing down the hairline, getting one more little piece here, and moving on through. And lastly, the hairline right there where she's going to tuck her hair behind the ear. I'm going to get that last little piece, and I'm actually going to take a little bit of the piece up to make it easier for me to paint. So I'm going to elevate this hair up so that I can get right under. And now leaving a little contrast in the middle. I'm bending my knees. Body position is so important. And you can see that really what I'm painting here is the ridge of that hair, because that piece of hair is the piece of hair that's going to be pulled back when she has a ponytail. So it's important for me to paint that side of the ridge versus that side of the ridge. So again, bringing hair up and back and away is what creates the seamless ribboning effect that you get when you're painting hair. And that holds true all over the head and every piece that you paint. Again, riding that ridge around. Now what I'm going to do is just take my loader brush, step back, ride that piece of hair. And when I go to drop this piece of hair, I'm going to be mindful that I want to drop it away. So I am going to just take my finger and make sure that I don't drop it into the other hair. And now you can see how that becomes more of a ribbon effect. Why? Because I painted the ridge of that hair. Now I'm going to step over to the other side and repeat the same procedure. So I'm ready to proceed on the other side. Keep in mind that based on how your guest's bang is cut, you may have to actually subdivide a section around the hairline so that you don't get what I call the black hole. The black hole rides on the ridges of the hair at 3/4 of the eyebrow. So based on how the bang falls, you may have painted that already with hers up. Now when she's back, if you see it, you would go in and actually get to it. Now in this case, my guest does not have a disconnected bang. So it's fine for me just to paint the hairline because I know I'm going to actually just ride on that ridge. Again, keeping in mind, one of the things that I talked about originally was that she had a base color first and already pre-lightened hair on the ends. So on this side, just to show you something a little different, I'm actually just going to touch it up and just dry brush a little bit of the lightener throughout, just to not get the ends quite as light as the scalp. So it'll be up to you to determine whether or not you want to pull through the ends, only go to the mid-shaft, or just stay on the regrowth. So here we go. So we're going to take the brush again, making a nice J, creating that wonderful mound onto the brush. Keep in mind, the bigger the mound, the wider the streak. The smaller the mound, the smaller the streak. So if you're trying to paint baby lights, you want to make sure that you have just a little bit of product on the brush. In this case, I'm actually just painting a little bit more of a normal medium weave streak. So now I'm just hitting the hairline without coming through to the ends. And I'm going to make sure that my ridge just rides as I see the hair would fall. So I'm just watching the gravity of the hair, and wherever the gravity begins to move is where I begin to paint. Granted, because this is a mannequin head, I'm showing you a couple of different options. So this wouldn't necessarily match up if this were my guest. I wouldn't go in and paint one side all the way through to the ends and the other side only at the regrowth. But I am just trying to show you the difference in how you can sometimes just touch it up and sometimes pull it all the way through. Coming down, continuing my nice stroke at the scalp, again reloading my product, again, and you can see that my body position is behind. So here my ridge is down, but if I do want to pull this ridge back, I can take my paintbrush that already has a tail comb on it, makes it very easy for you to part the hair off while you're standing here, and I can pull this ridge up and down, essentially pancaking that piece of hair around the hairline. Now, if I want to bring that all together, I'm just going to take my nice dry brush. So what I mean by a dry brush is it doesn't have the dome, it doesn't have a lot of product, and I'm just going to seamlessly blend. So just by dry brushing lightly like that, I won't have any erratic lines or any lines from where the lightener started and stopped. So just by doing that, I'm just dry brushing and lightly blending that hair. So now you can see that this side looks a little bit different. Now I'm going to pick this up here and I'm actually going to dry brush it as well. So one of the processes that I talk and I teach in balayage, and you'll probably hear a lot in this video, is the process of shoestringing. So shoestringing for me is where I actually pull the hair from side to side. And by pulling the hair from side to side like this, it allows me to actually comb the hair out. I have a lot of sayings in the Balay world, and one of the Balay Lama sayings is, if you paint a knot, you get a spot. So it's super important that you are actually pulling that hair out and making sure that you're combing it along the way. So okay, I'm going to go over where I just did my original hairline, just resaturate with a little bit more product coming on down. Now by taking my dry brush, which is the other side of my brush, I'm going to now just lightly and seamlessly blend that product out. So, as you can see from overhead, I have one side that's painted all the way through to the ends. The regrowth on one side painted all the way through to the ends. The regrowth on the other side only dry brushed and painted at the scalp. These are two awesome ways for you to do balayage in the salon and to make a little bit more money. Color melting. So again, another way to convert a foil is through the process called color melting. Now granted, there's a lot of interpretations of color melting out there, you know, where people are smudging colors, mixing colors, fantasy tones, rainbow hair, all of those types of things. But how I use color melting and the way that I became sort of knowledgeable about how to melt in a color is through a foil conversion. So think of with me for just a minute. Guest comes in. She has what I call the foil lines. Now these lines could be in the back, in the top, around the face, wherever they are. And we want to convert her from the hash marks to the look of balayage, which is going to be seamless ribbon type of hair. Now, say for instance, she came in and she was a foil and you said to yourself, I'm just going to put some low lights in there because maybe I just want to put a little contrast into the hair. Well, there's a challenge with that in the foil world because that is what I call the 2-to-1. So 2 highs to 1 low, 2 highs to 1 low. You have to realize that when you put your 2 foils in, that your low light is a long way away from your first highlight. So how can we take and fuse and blend these colors together and still have pops of blonde and strength? So when your guest comes and you do a highlight low light, you shampoo her out. First words out of her mouth typically are, oh, my color kind of looks gray. Well, the reason for that is because when you take your low light formula and you pull it through to the ends, now the ends have grabbed. The ends are grabbed, they're also not as blonde and they tend to look murky, green, and muddy. So for me, how I came up with color melting is how to melt the color into the foil weave, not being on to the ends of the hair and creating the look of a balayage. So here's how. So if you can see here, I've created the typical weave. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I am going to make this look like a balayage, what I have to do is I have to get some dark formulation And I use a typical color that I'm going to actually just shift the tonality of the hair. So I'm not using a permanent tint. I'm not using something that's maybe completely off-kiltered as to what her natural hair color is. I'm using something that lives in the same family of her natural hair color. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my fingers and I'm going to pinch the section together. By pinching the section together, you can see that I'm taking a little bit of 2, all of 3, and a little bit of 4, and I'm beginning to melt out the tone of that color. By doing so, I'm creating a triangle in the hair. So if there's anything you know about balayage, one of the things that we always talk to is the breaks and the triangles and how we actually create that look. So by doing so, I am just creating a little bit of a triangle in the hair. I've taken a little bit of 2, all of 3, and a little bit of 4, and I've brought that down together into that triangle. Now you can see how that begins to look. Now I'm going to take my lightener, and by taking my lightener, I'm going to come right next to what I just painted, and I'm going to create the look of the balayage. So now by doing that, I'm going to pick up 1 through 5, that whole section together. I'm going to add my lightener to 1. Let me smooth it out of my paddle a little bit. So I'm going to add my lightener to 1, and I'm going to begin to make 1 a little bit stronger. I'm also going to incorporate into 1 a little bit of 2. So now 1 and 2 become the lasagna that I need for my color melting. So that's 1 and a little bit of 2. Then I'm going to come over here to where I have the other side, add a little bit more lightener to my paddle. I'm going to pick this back up again, the section. I'm going to pick this section back up, and I'm going to now add a little bit more to 5, incorporate in a little bit of 4, and I'm going to begin the process of adding the lightener there. Now by shoestringing, I'm adding into that section. Again, adding a little bit more to 1 and 2, and a little bit more to 4 and 5. Bringing those two pieces and entities together, I'm going to add a little bit more lightener and use my loader brush to marry the two. So by picking this section up, now I'm ready to paint all the way down. Okay, so holding that together, adding in my lightener there, adding in my lightener here, and beginning the process. Now I'm adding again 1, 2, 4, and 5. And in the middle, I have a little bit of 2, all of 3, and a little bit of 4. Now you can start to see that I'm melting that color together and creating the look of how a balayage would appear had I put a low light in. Nice long brush stroke, continuing that product throughout. Resaturating on the ends and down. So what I've essentially done is I've melted out the middle 2 streaks, or 2.5 streaks, a little bit, all of it, and a little bit, creating a triangle in the middle and creating now some stronger pieces for balayage. Now I'm going to show you a different way that you can actually color melt by painting your light first and your dark second. Last time I showed you about how I painted the middle and pinched the middle out first and then painted the lightness on the outside. This time I'm going to teach you how to color melt where you actually paint the outside pieces first and then put the triangle on the inside. Now you might be thinking, why would you use one versus another? And the simple answer to that question is I always paint what needs my attention first. So now what I'm doing is I'm going to pull this hair down, and as you can see, obviously I'm sort of faking it till I'm making it because I'm not actually painting all of the hair here. But I pull the hair together like so, and I begin in the process of adding my highlight on one and a little bit of two. My highlight on one and a little bit of two. So you can see that there. Then I'm going to come in, I'm going to pinch and hold it at the throat. I'm going to make sure to bend my knees, and I'm going to get 5 and a little bit of 4. 5 and a little bit of 4. Making sure, and one of the things that I talk about is that my body position is always like a seesaw. So when I'm coming over, I'm really trying to ride the ridge here. So my brush is nice and flat. My hand is over and my brush is always flat. My brush is not like this or like that. So you can see how I'm just flat onto the hair there. And if you have any challenges getting down low like this, if you just bend your knees, get your brush flat in front of your face like that, you'll get it. Also, when you're trying to paint closer to the scalp, you want to open your hand up so that you can actually get closer. When your hand is closed, you tend to punch into the head, not allowing you to get close enough to the scalp. So now I've painted a little bit of 1, all of 1, a little bit of 2, a little bit of 4, and all of 5. So as I come down, I'm going to again shoestring, and looking at that I have 2, 3, and 4 in the middle. Going to add a little more lightener to my paddle because I know now that I'm going to really go for it as I come down. So nice, long, beautiful brush stroke. Nice, long, beautiful brush stroke. So by doing that and staying flat, it allows me to get the greatest of saturation. And I'm creating the triangle as I go. So again, staying really flat. The brush is super flat, and the product goes on accordingly. And just a little bit more product. And that will, of course, allow me to get the ends better saturated. So now I'm on the surface there. If I need to turn the hair, I can. I can paint on the underneath surface there, turning the hair back and bringing the two together. Now when I drop that down, as you can see, I still have what I need to take care of in the middle. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my small brush, I'm going to take my trusty Balay wrap, which is right here, and I'm going to pull on this section. So watch. When I pull, it straightens everything out and allows me to take a little bit of 2, all of 3, and a little bit of 4. And it allows me to marry in my triangle right next to the hair that I just painted. Again, not being scared about painting only on the surface of the hair, because I'm just painting and shifting the tone of the hair. Essentially toning out the parts of the hair that were the streaks from the foils, just essentially toning that out. Because when you weave hair, you're on the top and the bottom, and all I'm doing is taking off the top and beginning to color melt the guest into a better and more beautiful, seamless balayage. When I paint in the salon, I always have on my trusty gloves and my great apron to protect my clothes. You know, freehand painting, the lightener certainly moves all over, and you want to make sure that you're well protected. Also make sure to protect those pocketbooks of your guests. Move those out of the way so that it can be a nice clean space so that you don't ruin anything. Wear your gloves, wear your apron, and paint your way to financial freedom. Hi, I'm Candy Shaw, and I'm here to teach you my very infamous minking technique, a technique that I created when balayage began to take a mind of its own and start to become the new way that we were seeing hair. Now, how are you going to paint sort of an ombre type of effect on a short haircut? You know, I was challenged with that because it's very easy to do on the ends of hair, but it wasn't as easy to do in shorter hair. So I kind of came up with a way to make that seamless and a breeze for all the balayage painters out there. Now, if you know anything about me in my classroom, of course I have an academy in Atlanta and been teaching for over 20 years. It's all about painting breaks. And what I mean by that is where hair breaks open, it's always important to know the ridge and identify where that is. Now, in a short haircut such as this, it's going to be a convertible color. So obviously on this side is my strong side and this side is going to be my weak side. And why I say that is I want to make sure that I get a very strong ombre effect in the front of this hair here. I will also get underneath. And then I can also part it on the other side and give a softer appeal, something that's going to peek out through. I'll also show you some pictures at the end of this to kind of identify what I mean. You can also turn into my YouTube and check me out on stage doing this technique as well. So I always cut hair before I actually paint hair. It's important for me to know the lay of the land of the haircut, how the bangs are going to move, and especially in short hair, the no-no is when people foil hair or paint hair and then go back and cut it. The reason is then you have dotting and pop marks and little ridges around the backs of the head that are really not very pretty, and then we have to go back in with our razor shear or what have you, tool of choice, to sort of soften those lines. So I pre-cut this hair before, and I really have no rhyme or reason as to where I'm going to paint my highlights. I'm just going to feel it. And if there's anything that I wish that I could teach my balayage painters out there is you have to kind of let go. You have to let go of all the systems of brochets and crochets and triples and pancakes and fall lines and just take that knowledge and paint energy into your haircut. Put your mark on your balayage so they can't get that across the street. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in knowing that where my part lives on this side, and I'm going to just clip this hair off and drop my clip. And I'm going to come in and I'm just going to add a few brochet pieces onto this hair. So by taking my paintbrush and getting ready, I'm going to just turn my girl a little bit for you so that you can see. And I'm going to take that piece and just paint a little brochet there. So pretty simple, not a big deal. I'm just sort of following the lay of the land. The size of my pieces just sort of determine what it is that I want to do. And I know how this hair is going to sort of move back. So the first thing I'm going to do is just paint a few pieces to identify that break and give me some support of brightness underneath. So that's the first thing that I'm going to do. Then I'm going to come with my clip and I'm going to begin to just move up the side a little bit, knowing that I want to actually follow that same line of which I just painted so that my streak will be strong. So here we go. I'm going to come in now right above it, taking a little bit more lightener here and traveling down so that my highlight doesn't actually stop. It actually continues the line from underneath. And that's what typically when we're having foil lines in the hair of short hair, that's when you can look at somebody's work and say, ooh, they didn't complete the process of the whole highlight. So this allows me to travel onto that streak, and then lastly, one more here. Okay, so you can see right underneath the window of which I look through in my Balay wrap. Now I'm just painting that piece. Okay, so nothing really big deal. That's just a brochet. Anybody can do that, not a big deal. But now I sort of know where my energy lives behind the ear there. And I'm going to take a piece of wrap and I'm going to cover that up. Now knowing that, I can sort of see I'm going to move around to this side. Now right in the crown of the head, this is where I always teach about the money piece. I'm going to begin to identify that money piece. I don't want to miss that piece. And I'm going to paint right in the crown. And I'm actually going to do a big V here. So the very first thing I'm going to do is one leg of the V. Then, knowing where that hair breaks open, I'm going to complete the second leg of the V. Okay, so that V is going to come together like that. And because I changed my body position, I painted on the ridge of the outside of the V. So think about it if these are my legs and they're like this. I'm painting on the insides of the thighs on one side and the outside of the thigh on the other side. That makes sure that when that hair goes together, it's not one big clump of color. Okay, so now I'm going to cover that. I'm going to lay my tools down for a moment and come around and begin to continue onto this side. So now as I come onto this side of the hair, I'm looking at what I want to do. Now it would really, if I wanted, I could come in and go a little deeper into this haircut. So I do see that little ridge there. I'd kind of quite like that. And since I don't really have a rhyme or a reason, it's allowing me to see the, what it is that I want to paint. Okay, so now I'm just coming in, laying down my comb. It's a little difficult to do it all for the video. But nonetheless, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to just identify that break of the hair. So now I know where that lives in the haircut because I know that's the highest point there. So that's where that hair jumps up and goes there, and I'm going to cover that. Then, after I cover that, I'm just feeling my haircut. Now, I'm not into my minking quite yet. That's the part you have to see at the very end. Okay, so now I'm identifying this piece. So what is it that I want to do here? Is I feel like I want to see something behind the dark on the face. A lot of times everyone wants to paint the highlight right on the hairline. And really in this hair, I think really that darkness around the hairline will give a nice contrast to this haircut. So I'm going to add a little bit more lightener here. I'm going to step in and I'm going to identify the fall line right behind the hairline, leaving that hair there. I'm going to pick that up and paint that piece. So just moving right along in the haircut, the size of my highlights could just really determine what it is I want. If I wanted smaller pieces, of course I could have smaller pieces. But in this case, I know that I want to have a little bit of a bigger piece. Why? Because at the end of the day, the goal for me is to create a lot of movement in this haircut. Okay, so now this is talking to me, and I know that's going to be part of my mink, so I'm going to leave that alone. I'm going to lay my tools down one more time, take my comb, begin the process of identifying what's underneath here. So I'm going to come in at 3/4 of the eyebrow, right in there, because I know that that hair there is going to separate out. So that is going to easily be able to fall down and give that shadow of that crescent of the hair color there. So I want to get into the hairline, and here I'm going to see what's talking to me. And what's talking to me is what's behind it, also what's in front. Okay, so those are the two pieces that I'm going to select to paint. So I'm adding a little bit of the lightener, and I'm ready to come into this piece and paint. And on the fall line around the face. So here we are. So here I am here. And I'm going to just pancake this piece on both sides. So I'm at the top and I'm at the under. And I'm going to take my lightener, adding a little bit more lightener onto my brush and painting that. So that gives me some strength right around the face there, and then I know now I'm going to be able to have a nice, strong color process there. Okay, so now you see those pieces there. Now I'm going to come in. I'm going to identify one more piece here on the hairline, because I know that this hairline is going to be super important for me to get. I'm going to get up, up, and out. Why? Because I know that when this dries this way, I'm going to be on this ridge. And I also know that if I convertible that way, I'm going to be on that ridge. That gives me both of those areas to paint. So now I'm going to come in and I'm almost ready to do my minking. So first, I'm going to pull this back and away. And I'm going to create only on the bottom. And I'm going to fold that back. Because when it dries this way, it's going to be on the top. Okay, so only on the bottom there. Pulling that back into my paddle. I'm going to drop that there. That's one. Now I'm going to add this piece. So based on how it's dried, I'm just going to pull this back as well, and I'm going to paint the highest point. Highest point there is going to give me that piece. Now I'm going to take a little piece of my Balay wrap, and I'm going to show you a little trick that I do when I'm dropping hair on top of each other. I'm going to take the wrap, and I'm just going to go like that, drop it up underneath, and just pull that back and around. So now that just gives me an arc and a lift there and protection from the product. So now here we go. I'm going to get into my next piece. And knowing that this is going to come across, oops, wait, first I got to cover it. And once I cover it, I forgot about that. I was just doing the baseline. So now I'm going to cover it. So now this is going to lay right over the top of that. And I'm going to get really strong here. Okay, and I'm going to pancake. So I'm going to bring it down and I'm going to make sure that I'm on the top as well. So I'm riding that whole ridge of the hair. Can you see it? So riding that whole ridge of that hair there, that's super important to understand that that's what I'm painting, is that ridge. So as I come in, I'm going to add a little bit more lightener. Come over, stretch my haircut over, stretch, 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 add to the ends, and now I know that when that breaks apart, I'm going to have the perfect paint. So nonetheless, I'm going to come back onto this side and I'm going to just identify one piece right on this ridge, and then I'm ready to do my mink. So I'm going to pull this down, and knowing how this hair here is coming around in my haircut, I'm going to now paint this ridge of the hair. That way when that bursts open, that's going to open up. And remember, we decided that we were going to leave that nice and dark, so I can just take my Balay wrap and tuck that in like so. Now that just gets out of my way. And for purposes of the camera, I'm going to try to step in here so you can see me, but I'm going to turn her just a tiny bit so you can actually see what I'm doing here. And now I'm going to paint from this point here down and around. And leaving that dark underneath to add that contrast to the face area. So I'm going to just bring that around. I'm going to make sure that I get this out of my way because that's part of my mink. And I'm going to be on that ridge there. So can you see how that's becoming the highest point of that ridge? Now, just by pulling that hair and pulling and pulling and pulling, and by pulling it, I'm actually stretching those layers over and making sure that I get a lot of energy onto the ends. Okay, so now that is coming in and can stick right into the wrap. And now I'm going to take the wrap and just cover from there and around, bringing that up and down. So everything is ready and set for the minking. Now you can imagine that if based on which way she wears her hair, based on where the hair is going to bust open when she actually blows it dry. So how do I create an ombre type of look? Is I'm going to take a big brush and I'm actually going to tease the hair up from the scalp. And by doing it with a brush, it allows me not to get too knotty in the hair. Like so. And then I'm going to continue on. Okay, and final piece in the back. So what I'm creating here, and I'm going to turn her for the camera, is I'm creating the ends of the hair. So what I want to paint is the mohawk. So now by teasing that up, I've created all of that ends that I've done in my haircut, and I've made this become easier to see and easier to paint. The teasing has now pushed down some hair so that now my highlights will be more seamless on the ends. And this is how you can create an ombre type of effect in hair that is short. So I'm going to take my paddle and my brush, and I'm going to just begin to paint on the side, making sure that I'm still on the side of my brush. And I'm going to first paint on this side that I'm facing for the camera. Again, dry brushing, blending, and skimming as I go. Making sure that I have enough product. Then I'm going to turn, do the same on this side, making sure that I have enough product and that I'm dry brushing and blending that hair as I go up. Now in the middle of this hair, some of the hair will stay dark, which is what makes this such a great technique for short hair. And as I lift that up, that is going to be like that. Then I'm going to take a little bit more towards the back of the hair, and I'm going to do the ends here as well. How far down I go is really up to me and is up to the look that I'm trying to create. But in this case, in the crown, I'm going to go a little bit further down and keeping my paddle straight. And then same as it goes to here. Now as I begin to let this go, I know that I'm going to stretch again this hair in the front, and I'm going to create the look that way. If I need to come back and touch that, I can, and just making sure that I have enough product. This ensures that what I've actually painted here is a technique that is going to give me a lot of saturation to the ends. And if I need, I can use this for the heat and put that on and cover it up. Now, when you do that in the salon, I will assure you that that will get a lot of people looking around and wondering why they're not getting the minking technique. I know that for me personally, one of the reasons that drove me to balayage was the understanding that if you don't step out of your box and try things like this, then you'll just be a conventional hairdresser. So I hope you can take this technique of minking, use it behind the chair, make a little bit more money, but most importantly, have fun as you're painting hair. I sure hope you've enjoyed this DVD and these special tips and tricks that I've shared with you today. You've learned a lot. You've learned how to skim. You've learned the money piece. You've learned how to pancake. You've learned how to color melt, do a foil conversion, a minking technique, and many, many other things. And I hope that you'll take this back into the salon and really practice. We have a saying in the Balay world, and that is do one on a mannequin, the second one on your sister, and the third one on a paying guest. You can do this. It just takes a little bit of practice and a great brush stroke. Don't give up. The Balay Lama's there if you ever need me. Happy painting, everyone.